We're here to talk about the Ferndale Access Project. I'm Jeff Pimentel, Project Manager with Caltrans here in District 1. Many of you probably have seen over the course of the other public meetings we've done on this project, either through the emergency repairs or the permanent project that we're talking about here today, and we have talked about for a little while now. I think the last time we came and had a meeting was in July of last year, if I'm not mistaken. This is what's called the public scoping meeting as part of our notice of preparation for preparation of the environmental document, specifically under CEQA for the environmental impact report. In terms of just some housekeeping, if everyone could hold questions at the end of the presentation, we will have a time for that. Any comments you have can be left with any of us today on the back table, but if you give them to us, we'll get them in the right spot. And we do have comment cards here. You'll find those in the back. You can either leave them, as I mentioned, or you can also mail them in. Since this is a public process as part of the environmental impact report, any comments that are left here will be published. So none of these comments will be anonymous. Just wanted to mention that to you all. And when you mail them, you'll mail them to Brianna Carlson at Caltrans District 1, 1656 Union Street in Eureka. Our wonderful Mariah Miracle in the back there is recording the audio right now, and then she'll dub that to this presentation. So if you want to watch this again, the same way that I'm delivering it now, or others, we encourage you to share with other people so that they can watch it. It'll be uploaded onto the engagement portal, and I'll let you know how to find that if you don't know already. Our last public meeting, I believe, is on there as well, and other information that we've shared. And then in terms of finding the engagement portal, presentations, all of that, you'll just go to ferndaleaccess.org. That takes you to the Caltrans website. And then there's a link in there to our engagement portal that has all of this information. All right, non-discrimination policy statement. Caltrans ensures that no person in the state of California is excluded from participation in, denied the benefits of, or otherwise subjected to discrimination in Caltrans programs, policies, procedures, activities, and services on the grounds of race, color, national origin, sex, age, or disability. For information or guidance on how to file a complaint or obtain more information regarding Title VI, please contact the Title VI branch manager at 916-324-8379 or visit the following webpage. So for tonight's agenda, we're going to talk a little more about what the purpose and reason we are here tonight for the public scoping meeting, go into some project background, purpose and need of the project, give you an update on the installation of the seismic gates, as well as the recent bridge survey that we conducted, I think, back in January of this year. We'll go through the project alternatives, hit on some environmental topics, review schedule and cost, and then close with how to stay engaged and informed. Before I go into this, for those of you that came to the last public meeting and we showed all the alternatives, this is going to be a large repeat of what you heard at the last meeting. The way I would kind of maybe curb being frustrated by not a lot of new information is that I feel like we've done a really good job coming to you guys early and engaging earlier than we would typically on most projects. So I feel like we're a little further ahead in terms of getting information out to you. But as part of the notice of preparation for the environmental document, we do have to formally have this meeting, which we kind of already did in July. We have to have it in this new project approval and environmental document phase. We do have some new information for you and updates, so there will be some things in there for you, but just bear with me as some of it will be a repeat. All right, so for public scoping meeting, as part of our notice of preparation, noticing that we are preparing this environmental impact report under CEQA so that we can be compliant under the CEQA process. Purpose is to inform. It informs and focuses the content of the environmental impact report and also provides the public an opportunity to share information leading to alternative development and selection, which a lot of that we have already done because we have 7 alternatives that we're currently studying based on your input. In terms of public participation, your comments will be utilized for development of project alternatives, also identifying resources that may be potentially affected by the project, and then also analyzing effects for the alternatives themselves. In terms of project location, most of us all know this, drove over it on the way here likely, talking about Fernbridge. State bridge number is 04-0134, and it's in Humboldt County on Route 211 between post miles 77 and 78.8. In terms of project background, emergency repairs are made immediately after the December 22 earthquake to restore essential traffic, minimize the extent of damage, and protect the remaining facilities. And now an improvement project has been initiated to identify solutions that will provide safe, sustainable, and reliable access to Ferndale. Update on seismic gates. This is just a rendering. They were not installed just in the last 10 minutes of you all driving over. So remaining work is the changeable message signs and the structure associated with those, cameras and poles. We are planning to have some nighttime traffic control in order to do that work. There'll be some crane equipment that will have to come in to place those items. We also have some monitor sensors on the structure that are currently not functioning that we need to replace. I believe, Ty could probably correct me, but I believe there'll be a specialized like snooper truck that will go and put people underneath the structure. I'm not certain if we'll be able to do that at the same time as the other equipment, so there could be, I'm hearing probably yes, a couple instances of traffic control in order to do both of those items of work. But we do hope to complete the work in the summer of this summer. In terms of the bridge survey, so back in January of this year, we had some traffic control in place in order to do a kind of a three-dimensional survey of the structure. One of the main purposes was to establish a new baseline for where the structure's at in terms of crack widths and any potential movement in the future since doing the emergency repairs and some pavement and asphalt work that we had done. And we also set new control points to be able to do future surveys to use as a reference. And again, like I mentioned, to monitor bridge movement. In this recent survey that we did notice approximately a ½ inch increase in crack width on Pier 3, and that was since the December high flow event that we had. We've since had another high flow event. We haven't done another survey since then, so we can't really predict whether we would expect to see any movement as a result of that, but just knowing that we are monitoring the structure, there's no cause for concern. Our bridge crews have inspected and seen the bridge, and there's no cause that would need any emergency repairs or anything like that. But we just wanted to be transparent and let you guys know that's the recent update that we have based on that survey we did back in January. We covered this last time as well. Just this is our timeline for project development. We start here in the planning phase. The last phase that we just completed back in August of 25 was project initiation. That document essentially developed preliminary cost, scope, and schedule for the project. And then in August, we kicked off into the project approval and environmental document phase, where we'll be preparing this environmental impact report under CEQA and what's called an environmental assessment under NEPA on the federal side. So last time this red star was here, so we've gone a little further, but it's where maybe it could slide a little further forward or back, but generally we've made some progress. But anyway, this phase is planned to be complete, or targeted to be complete in April of 29. And essentially by that point, what the result would be is we would have an alternative selected. That is the outcome of this phase, is we have an alternative selected that would then move into the design phase to have plans, specifications, and an estimate prepared, which is targeted to be completed in April of 2031. And with that, contractors would bid on that plan package and be awarded to the lowest responsive bidder, and then we'd go into construction at that time. Timeline for construction is kind of a range depending on the alternative, and will continue to kind of shift as we dive deeper into the project and understand more about it. Some of our timelines are a little lengthy right now, but we haven't also gone through the effort of looking at ways of trying to make the construction timeline a little more efficient and tighter to shrink it down. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. So what is PNED, Project Approval and Environmental Document phase that we're in now? It's a phase that we prepare an environmental document, we perform our environmental technical studies, we do preliminary engineering and alternatives analysis between all the alternatives that we're currently looking at in this phase. We do community engagement, which I forgot to mention then, if you notice, community engagement span all phases of the project. So that'll be something that never stops. We will always be engaging with you. And on a project like this, more so than you would ever probably see on most projects that Caltrans is developing. We'll also kick off agency coordination with all the resource agencies such as Coastal Commission and other agencies that will require permits from, and we'll have an opinion and say in the outcome of the project. And then at the end of this phase, or at some point in this phase, we'll have selected a preferred alternative as well. And then concluding with an environmental document that's certified and approved. Every project in our department has a very specific purpose and need. The purpose and need really drives everything that we do with the project, why the scope of the project is what it is. So this is almost the definition for what a project includes. So the purpose of this project is to restore reliable access to and from the city of Ferndale for all roadway users, which includes providing a structurally resilient bridge that meets current bridge design standards, reducing risk of damage from future events. And then the need, Fernbridge provides the most direct route to and from the city of Ferndale. On December 20th of 22, a 6.4 magnitude earthquake with an epicenter approximately 10 miles southwest of Ferndale damaged the road surface and bridge approaches. Monitoring sensors installed in the bridge indicated a permanent change in vertical pier alignment and increases in crack width on piers 2, 3, 4, and 5. Emergency repairs were made immediately after the earthquake to restore essential traffic, minimize the extent of damage, and protect the remaining facilities. A permanent solution is needed for the bridge to be more resilient and reduce the risk of damage from future events. So those two statements are really driving the scope and the work of what we're doing on this project. Another topic, or a topic that a lot of us are probably curious about, is are we going to be able to rehab the existing bridge, or are we going to have to replace it? And that's been something that we've been talking about, but we don't have the answer to yet. And as we mentioned in our last public meeting, our teams are studying whether rehabilitation of the existing bridge to keep that bridge out there is possible. And if possible, what would this bridge look like? What would the scope of that improvement look like? So some of the things that we're currently doing right now and will be doing to get to that, and also a schedule to bring a determination on what this, is it feasible? And if it is, what it would look like. We're going to be doing, we're currently kicking off channel surveys with our survey crews to get topographical mapping of the channel between bank to bank. We'll be doing geotechnical investigations to get soil samples, hopefully starting as early as this summer, potentially in the fall of this year, which is going to be critical for us to be able to do our structural analysis on the bridge to be able to see if rehab is possible and what the scope of rehab would look like. We'll be preparing a foundation report from those soil investigations. Our structures team will be doing a scour and seismic analysis. And a little note on this, typically at this early phase of a project, we would do a very kind of basic structural analysis to be able to determine what the scope of work would be. In this case, because this is a kind of a pivotal big answer that everyone needs to know in terms of rehab versus replacement, our team has decided to do a very intense analysis when it comes to the structures. With the real reason being, when we come to you in approximately summer or spring, summer of next year with some answers, we want to be fairly confident in what we're telling you in terms of what's possible and what the scope of a replacement would be, if that is something that could be on the table. So that's going to take a little more time than it typically does. So we have a pretty tight timeline in order to get to that and still meet our milestones in terms of completing project approval and environmental document, our design phase, and so on and so forth. But with this assessment and analysis, if deemed that rehab is possible, we plan to come with you with a scope of what a rehab would look like. Not only visually, but kind of the nuts and bolts of what we'd have to do to that structure to make it continue to stand there for whatever amount of time that we can design it to stay there for, which I plan also to have that answer if that's possible. So now I'll just review the alternatives that we have. There are 7 alternatives. Alternatives 1 and 2 are rehabilitate existing fern bridge for all traffic. So alternative 1, though, would do it. I have a laser on here. I do, but you can't see it. Alternative 1 would rehabilitate the structure, which is shown in yellow at its current width. And alternative 2, essentially the same project, but it would rehabilitate the existing structure, but it would widen it to a standard width to include shoulders, a separated bike path, pedestrian path, and whatnot. These numbers here just dictate the phases of work. So step 1, stage 1 would be to construct an upstream trestle. And I'm gonna show a staging example a little bit later so you can see, but I'll just walk through this one. So construct an upstream trestle. Here, 1, we would do that item of work first. Then second, we would construct a temporary detour bridge in red. This one would need a detour bridge to reroute traffic while doing construction. 3 would be the downstream trestle that we would construct to perform work from. And then stage 4, we would do the rehabilitation work to the existing bridge. Stage 5, we would remove the downstream trestle. And 6, we'd remove the temporary detour bridge in red, and stage 7, we would remove the upstream trestle. So that's the order of work for these alternatives. Alternatives 3 and 4 would construct a new permanent bridge, and they would rehabilitate Fern Bridge for non-motorized use, for PEDs, for bikes. In this case, the new bridge is shown on a new alignment. I do want to just throw a little footnote here. Visually, the trestle with respect to the new bridge and even the previous detour bridge and alternatives 1 and 2, there's a lot more width between those on this graphic visually than would be needed when doing construction. So in these cases, you would expect that these lines would be much tighter because we don't need that much width. And I only want to say that because we're showing a new bridge over here through the depot and things of that nature. So that would get much tighter and closer to the existing bridge is all I wanted to say. So the difference between 3 and 4, alternative 3 would rehab for non-motorized use with very minimal alteration. And then alternative 4 would actually take the superstructure or the top portion of the structure that has the roadway and replace it with a new steel superstructure. That would be the difference between 3 and 4. Alternative 5 would construct a new permanent bridge and demolish and remove the existing Fern Bridge structure. This one would construct a new bridge on a new alignment, however, even though the existing Fern Bridge would be removed. Alternative 6 would construct a new permanent bridge, but it would leave Fern Bridge. And what we've talked about here is some type of a monument. Whether that is keeping the bridge totally intact there or down to maybe only leaving piers in the water, that is the intent of this alternative. The challenge behind leaving a bridge intact that's historic and not getting maintenance is it's likely a liability because people can recreate under the bridge. So that's not really something we've discussed at length in terms of what does a monument look like. But so monument hasn't been defined, but that's what the purpose of this alternative is. And then finally, the last alternative, remove existing Fern Bridge and construct a new permanent bridge on the existing alignment. So this one, the new bridge would replace and be exactly where we're driving on Fern Bridge today. In terms of lane widths between the various alternatives, alternative 1, rehab the existing bridge with really no changes to the width. So it would have just remain with 0-foot shoulders, 11-foot 4-inch lanes, and no separated pedestrian path. There's an asterisk on that because we're actually recommending to reject this alternative with the clear reason is that it doesn't meet the purpose and need. The purpose and need is intended to serve all road users, pedestrians, cyclists, motorized vehicles. That alternative does not do that. And so we are officially now recommending to remove that alternative from the alternatives being considered. And that's why that's there. Alternatives 2 through 7 do incorporate 8-foot shoulders, 12-foot lanes, and a 6-foot separated pedestrian path. In terms of replacement alignment, so when we're looking at alternatives that propose to replace the bridge, not like Alternative 7 on the existing alignment, but off alignment. We are focusing our efforts now on looking at an upstream alignment. Through our preliminary studies and reviews of the site, any other location is going to have much greater impacts to coastal ag land and take ag land away from the community by rerouting the bridge and 211. Also increase impacts to wetlands, higher construction, higher mitigation cost, much more additional right-of-way, as well as increased channel impacts due to additional temporary trestles that we would need with a new structure that's much further away from the existing. So I know that's something that has come up in past meetings where it was asked about and we weren't really ready to answer that question yet, but we are fairly confident now that that is the most logical point for our new structure, and that's where and we will still be studying, the entire environmental study limits that we've identified, which go much further than just that upstream alignment, but that is where we're seeing as likely makes the most sense for a new structure if you have to build it in a new location. I'll run through that construction staging example really quick just to help it make sense for everyone. So this says alternatives 1 and 2. We are recommending now that alternative 1 is not going to be an alternative further considered. So really you just focus on this for alternative 2. This would be rehabilitating it for all traffic with a wider standard width. Stage 1, we would construct the upstream trestle. Stage 2, you would construct a temporary detour bridge. Stage 3, construct the downstream trestle. Stage 4, you'd rehabilitate the existing Fern Bridge. Stage 5, remove the downstream trestle. Stage 6, you would remove the temporary detour bridge. And then 7, you would remove the upstream trestle and be back driving on the route you're all familiar with. So now on to environmental topics related to the project. As we mentioned earlier, under CEQA, we're preparing an environmental impact report, and under NEPA on the federal side, an environmental assessment. In terms of the resources the EIR will examine impacts the project could have on, here's a list of them. The ones that are in bold are expected to have potentially significant impacts as a result of the project for those resources. All right, now on impacts and mitigation in terms of how we going to deal with that on a project like this and others is first we try to avoid impacts, to the extent we can. And for what we can't avoid, we try to minimize those impacts. For what we can't avoid and for what we can't, to the extent we can minimize, we then look on site within the project limits to perform on-site restoration for mitigation to offset those impacts. When we do mitigation and restoration on site, we have typically 1-to-1 mitigation ratios or much lower mitigation ratios, which brings about a lower cost. And what we can't then mitigate on site, we then look for an off-site location to mitigate. Those come with higher mitigation ratios, much more mitigation that we have to do with respect to the impact we're having. So that also drives the cost up. And just a note, we are expecting to have both on-site and off-site mitigation for this project. In terms of the construction schedule for alternatives 2 through 4, right now, and don't be too alarmed, but 9 to 10 years for those. Alternatives 5 and 7 are estimated to be anywhere between 6 and 9, and then alternative 6, approximately 4. I do expect these numbers to shift as we get further into development, and there is no doubt an interest and desire to reduce those significantly. So that's where we're starting at, and that's definitely a topic of how can we reduce those. But that becomes also easier as we focus in closer onto a preferred alternative to focus our efforts on how we're going to also shrink that time frame. In terms of the capital cost of the project, for alternative 6, we're looking at for construction and right-of-way capital. And when I say capital cost, that is the cost to construct, that is the cost to acquire right-of-way, that is the cost to do our mitigation, it's the cost for our permits. It does not include my time, Dominic's time, Andre's time, Bree's time to go and design and develop and study this project. So the support cost for staff is not included in that. That's just to construct and the right-of-way capital components of the project. So alternative 6, approximately $220 million. Alternatives 1 through 4, which alternative 1 is no longer an alternative we're studying. So 2 through 4 and 7, approximately 270 to 360 million. And then alternative 5, approximately 240 million. These numbers will also change as we get further into the project, which is the reason why they're rounded and the reason why we're giving you ranges as well. In terms of the public engagement portal, which probably a lot of you are familiar with, you can get to it from the ferndaleaccess.org website, and then there is a clear link that says engagement portal. You click on there, it'll take you to this. If you want to find any documents, past meeting notes, presentations, this presentation, once Mariah gets it up, you'll go to the Documents tab and you'll find all of that there. My contact information is also there, so have any questions, feel free to reach out. And now how to comment. So you can submit a public comment today. We have the comment cards and you can leave it with us, or you can mail it in and they must be submitted by 5 p.m. on April 17th. I believe also you can submit a comment by email, and you can also submit a comment on the engagement portal. So that 5 p.m. April 17th would apply for all of those various mediums to leave a comment. If you mail your comment in, you're going to mail it to Caltrans District 1, attention Brianna Calson at 1656 Union Street in Eureka, 95501.